This video is brought to you by Ground News. Stick around to hear more about the special discount they're providing to the entire Upper Echelon community. All right, today's topic is one that affects practically all of you watching this, but most people don't even realize it exists. The subject is price discrimination, which refers to the reality that you are simply being charged more money for various different products and services because you demonstrated somehow through digital behavior that you are able and willing to do so. Willing is a pretty strong word here. Most people don't even realize what's happened in the first place. Therefore, it's typically more so a question of ability, but the customer ultimately needs to press the actual button. So the concept of willingness does end up playing a small part here. In my view, first degree price discrimination is horrifying, but to understand precisely why and how, we need context. Everyone out there has encountered various different examples of price discrimination, but the basic foundation is built on three different categories, or degrees. Third degree price discrimination is based on demographics. Think of a veteran's discount at a supermarket or a senior's discount at the movie theater. These decisions are aimed at sizable chunks of the population and are typically regarded as positive. I'm not here to argue that the elderly couple down the road shouldn't get a discount on their movie theater experience because that's a horrible thing to argue, and obviously it hurts no one. But that's just third degree. What about the others? Second degree price discrimination is preference-based, and while it certainly does have unique benefits, it can also be a lot more psychologically manipulative. Second degree price discrimination is more targeted and refers to things like location, coupons, or quantity discounts. On the one hand, it's great to get a bulk discount on buying diapers, I guess, for example, if you happen to have multiple young children. But on the other, depending on how the discount is structured, it can often be a ploy to extract more transaction revenue from a single purchase instead of a mechanism to increase affordability. Still, given that second-degree price discrimination still revolves heavily around a reduction in the overall cost of goods and services to incentivize a purchase, it is, at worst, typically neutral, and at best, net positive. However, when we arrive at first-degree price discrimination, things get wild, because first degree is where the transition officially takes place from cost reduction to cost increase based on targeted methods to extract more money from everyone who can theoretically afford to pay it, rather than save money for those who theoretically can't. First degree price discrimination goes by a lot of different names, but those names are carefully designed by think tanks and focus groups to sound as innocent as possible. Dynamic pricing or personalized pricing are names that you'll hear a lot more frequently. But make no mistake, because what they really mean is first degree price discrimination based on consumer surplus. That's the technical term. So how does it work? Simple answer, it works by determining how much you can afford to pay, or rather how much they can possibly charge where you still make the purchase. And it works because of the ungodly level of data collection and digital surveillance that is taking place all day, every day, through basically every single application and service that we use. Hypotheticals don't work forever, so let's get to some real-life examples, like Uber. Now, to really explain this, you have to bear with me because it's one of those connect the dots type pictures, and each dot is actually super important. Uber, obviously, is the global ride-sharing application business originally founded in the United States, but Uber is also a perfect example of first-degree price discrimination built on top of something that pretends to be, and should be, cheaper or more cost-effective, but in reality is just a mechanism to extract as much money as possible from your wallet. Dot number one is an interview conducted by NPR with Keith Chen, Uber's head of economic research, and I'm just going to play a snippet here so you can hear it for yourself.
So for example, a data scientist named Peter at Uber discovered somewhat accidentally this really kind of interesting fact. And that is one of the strongest predictors of whether or not you're going to be sensitive to surge. In other words, whether or not you're going to kind of say, oh, 2.2, 2.3, I'll give it a 10 to 15 minutes to see if surge goes away, is how much battery you have left on your cell phone.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Yeah,
of
like
course.
when your cell phone is like down to like below 5% battery and that little icon on the iPhone turns red, then people start saying, well, I better get home, like, because I don't quite know how I'm going to get home otherwise. Now, we absolutely don't use that to kind of like push you a higher surge price, but it's an interesting kind of psychological fact of human behavior.
Yeah, so that's pretty self-explanatory, where the company detects when your phone is about to die and knows that you're therefore willing to pay something like 2 or 3 times more than you normally would just to get home before that happens. Of course, they absolutely don't use that to push you into a higher surge price, quote unquote, but they certainly had the ability to do so and the knowledge in 2016. So again, dot number one. He also discusses the psychological barriers of pricing and how round numbers are interpreted as less trustworthy for some reason, or how they observe increases or decreases in the number of customers willing to pay massive premiums based on simple changes in phrasing. But the point is, They profile their customers and understand precisely what it takes to extract more money, and also when they are most vulnerable to said tactics. Now, as I research topics like this one, there's a variety of techniques and tools that I choose to use. Surfing the internet is fine, looking for information is great, it really is, but the majority of whatever contemporary news you read nowadays is either politically biased, misinformed, or just flat out wrong. To combat this issue, partisan bias, corporate influence, etc., there's a particular tool I like to use called Ground News. It's an app and website where I can get a much broader view of the existing landscape because they compile sources from all around the world into one singular feed. For starters, while researching this particular video, I searched up economy and I can see top stories, news stories like this one, for example, where Fed Chair Powell is calling talk of cutting rates premature and saying that more hikes could happen. Here you can see over 30 sources covered it, with a majority being center or left-leaning, and a blind spot for people who only read right-leaning sources. What I like most about Ground News is that for each article you can clearly see defined tags determining the ownership, factuality, and, most importantly, bias of the reporting outlet. Let's look at Raw Story, leaning left, that calls the rate cut premature, while the center from Reuters says to move carefully on interest rates, which is a contrast from Fox Business, leaning right, saying Feds won't hesitate to raise them. As you can see, it was quick and easy to reveal disproportionate coverage, which helps you see the bigger picture. Ground News maintains objectivity and transparency by drawing from 3 different news monitoring organizations to assess bias ratings and factuality score, ensuring that they can focus on offering context rather than dictating perspectives. Personally, I use the Vantage subscription, and with it there's a feature called My News Bias, which is basically a dashboard showcasing how your reading habits change, what are your top sources, and whether or not you exist in an echo chamber. In my opinion, for that reason alone, it's a particularly valuable tool. In my own individual research, Ground News has become an incredibly valuable resource, offering access to view all sides of every story. I'm thrilled to continue working with them because they're an independent and subscriber-supported platform, contributing to media accountability. And if you go to ground.news/echelon with the link down below, you'll get 30% off unlimited access to their app, website, and newsletters. Big thank you to Ground News for sponsoring the channel. So what is dot number 2? Well, dot number 2 is called Grayball. See, 1 year later, in 2017, Uber got hit with a media firestorm when a secret program it operated called Grayball was exposed, which was specifically designed to deceive law enforcement in cities where its activity violated regulations. Let me give the full picture here. Quote from The Guardian in this case, because I'm not paying for the New York Times. Grayball used geolocation data, credit card information, social media accounts, and other data points to identify individuals they suspected of working for city agencies to carry out the sting operations. It was used in Portland, Oregon, Philadelphia, Boston, and Las Vegas, as well as France, Australia, China, South Korea, and Italy. End quote. Now, Uber defended itself by saying that it was their responsibility to protect drivers from harm, further elaborating that they deny ride requests from fraudulent users who violate their terms of service, including the potential harm of a traffic citation, I guess. But the program makes it abundantly clear that Uber is tracking geolocation data, credit card information, and social media accounts, among other data points, there's more, to identify if their users are fraudulent, regardless of whatever ultimate purpose they claim it's for. That's number 2, but now for dot number 3. Also in 2017, this time reported by Bloomberg, Uber transitioned from previously controversial surge pricing algorithms to something called route-based pricing, or upfront pricing, which began charging customers based on what it determined they were, quote, willing to pay. Furthermore, they rolled this changeover into the driver's side of their business as well, in 2022 at least, creating a nebulous framework where no one actually knows how much they are going to be paid from any given ride. According to Bloomberg, quote, Uber calculates riders' propensity for paying a higher price for a particular route at a certain time of day. For instance, someone traveling from a wealthy neighborhood to another Tony spot might be asked to pay more than another person heading to a poorer part of town, even if demand, traffic, and distance are the same, end quote. Corroborating this, based on analysis done by Wanjie Chang out of Washington State University in 2020 from a study titled Route-Based Price Discrimination of a Ride-Hailing Company, the Case of Uber, quote, as what theory predicts, it is empirically observed that Uber does price discriminate by charging higher ride fare to the route in which riders have higher reservation price. When routes are confined to airport to hotels, evidence is found suggesting that the route-based pricing sets higher ride fare on the route where the room rate is higher, end quote. That right there is a conceptual through line predicated on 3 consecutive dots where a company is A, detecting when and how much more money they can get from their customers, particularly the realization that someone whose phone is about to die will be willing to pay excessive amounts of money in that vulnerable moment. B, collecting enormous amounts of data on their users for the purpose of preventing law enforcement from using the application to catch violations, up to and including social media accounts, apparently. And C, a deliberate change whereby they will price the service higher for people that they suspect are able or willing to pay more based on data collected. From what I see, based on the research that I've done, that is first degree price discrimination of the highest order. If accurate, this would indicate that by using Uber, you will be directly charged more as a result of your behavior by way of the data they collect about you. And if the algorithm decides that you are willing, or most importantly, able to pay a higher fare, or perhaps if you are desperate enough to pay substantially more, it may raise the price on you. That is the phenomenon I'm talking about, and that is the problem we are increasingly faced with now that did not exist 15 years ago because they didn't have the data. How about another example? Amazon. This one is a little bit more complex when compared to Uber, but it ties together the idea that price discrimination is an embryonic industry still in its developing stages, where something previously thought to be unattainable is now becoming real. Let's start with this. In the year 2000, a lifetime ago, at the current pace of technology at least, Amazon ran an experiment. Now, Jeff Bezos would later publicly refer to that experiment as a mistake, but the effect was that the retailer began offering different prices to different customers for the exact same items. Amazon adamantly claimed at the time that demographic information had not been used for this experiment, and that the concept would be fully discontinued, but even still, over 2 decades ago, the idea of modern dynamic pricing was actively being born. To this day, Amazon appears to have avoided the pitfall of blatantly obvious first-degree price discrimination on its platform, but that's not to say that it doesn't engage in the concept generally. See, Amazon is actually changing the price tags millions of times per day based on algorithmic predictions, which has a wild effect on retail consumers. This website right here, it's called Camel for whatever reason, tracks the historic price of items on Amazon, and the results are actually kind of incredible. Take this laptop, for example. A few weeks ago, it was $130. 1 month before that, it was over $280 briefly, and for the rest of the year, it fluctuates massively. It turns out Amazon utilizes the same sort of surge pricing model that Uber relied on. However, being a significantly more profitable, dominant, and successful company, at least in terms of macro decision making, Amazon managed to keep itself 2 steps ahead. Why does it matter? Well, to explain that, we need to look at research from 2012 on internet price discrimination based on affluence. Simply put, this was an experiment done where computer profiles were created imitating different types of buying power. One profile was constructed to imitate the browsing habits of a wealthy individual. One was constructed to imitate the browsing habits of someone earning significantly less money and subsequently budgeting as a result of that, etc., etc. But the results are what struck me as interesting. When using these profiles, constructed to appear as if they are either economically privileged or economically struggling, advertisements that they were served varied dramatically. Quote, "We used the previously trained personas to examine the discrepancies of products based on the browsing behavior. We also used a clean profile as a baseline. We did not observe price discrimination in our results. However, we observed different search results on 2 sites. First, we examined 12 search queries in google.com 3 times for each profile. For half of the queries, the results included several suggested products together with the prices. There is a noticeable difference in the prices of these products, as we show in Figure 4. For instance, the mean price was 4 times higher in the case of headphones for the affluent persona than for the budget one. Second, we examined the top 10 hotel offers on cheap tickets. We searched for hotels in 8 different cities on 8 different dates. The search engine of cheap tickets returned offers with higher prices for the affluent profile." End quote. Here's the tricky part. That's not technically first-degree price discrimination, as the paper accurately noted. However, it indicates that these companies, Google and a ticket sales venue in this particular case, are actively identifying when someone's online behavior indicates that they are wealthy and serving them different products or deals in order to extract greater profit. That's conceptually better than serving them the same product with different prices, but this was in 2012, more than a decade ago, where the amount of data collected and targeting capability that they possess has now increased exponentially. Let's do some rapid-fire examples to demonstrate the scope of the problem. In 2015, it was revealed that the Princeton Review was perpetrating second-degree price discrimination against particular zip codes, thereby changing the price of their SAT prep courses based on where people live. This resulted in Asian families disproportionately being required to pay thousands of dollars extra for the same material for no actual legitimate reason whatsoever, other than profit potential determined by an algorithm. Staples and Home Depot did something similar. However, in this case, they were adjusting prices downward based on whether or not the customer lived in close proximity to a rival store of theirs. The effect was that people in cities or major population centers received discounts, while those in rural communities, where there was only one option to begin with, had to pay more. Orbitz, the travel booking website, specifically targeted MacBook users and steered them to higher priced hotel options compared to Windows users. As a result of their spending habits, MacBook users were seen to spend on average 30% more for travel, apparently, which is, again, demographic discrimination, those that own particular hardware, but clearly indicates the bevy of factors that are being drawn from. Even airlines, which are uniquely terrible for a number of different reasons, heavily engage in price discrimination, pushing now from second degree towards first degree based on the immeasurable amount of data that they are able to collect on their in-flight passengers. More and more, every day, we are being individually assessed and targeted by retail giants, software companies, or service providers. And the scary part, generally speaking, it's completely legal. Price discrimination is mostly governed by a trifecta of laws: the Sherman Antitrust Act, the Clayton Antitrust Act, and the Robinson-Patman Act. The details are extremely boring, but the basic summary is that price discrimination really only comes under fire occasionally when it undermines the competitive process. When used against the customer for the purpose of extracting maximum cost, it's basically totally fine. The problem comes when we realize that the concept of perfect price discrimination is supposed to just be a thought experiment. It's not supposed to be real. The closest we ever got was the widespread trade concept of haggling, still present in some places around the world. But even then, this was an upfront intuition-based negotiation between humans in front of each other in real time. However, with the scale of data collection and digital surveillance that we now all agree to every single day, it's becoming real, and no one is actually prepared for what that means. Here's a hypothetical. Imagine a world where price discrimination continues to grow and becomes a dominant industry norm. Now imagine that you're making, $50,000 annually as a salary in that world and barely getting by. The items you see online, the rides you take in a cab or a ride share, even the hotels you book when you finally have the time, are all difficult to afford, but you make ends meet. You budget successfully and you find a way to get through. Cool. In a world of first-degree price discrimination, this would be because the services you are accessing dynamically adjusted to the means at your disposal in real time, settling at the maximum value they can profitably extract from you that you would ever be willing to pay. Now imagine you get a raise. You make $100,000 per year, but gradually, over the span of a few months, maybe 6 or 8 or 10, everything just costs more. The items you see online are just flat out more expensive all the time. The rides you take to and from your new apartment, with a slight upgrade and a better view now, are the same length but cost double compared to last year, and the bookings you try to make are consistently priced higher even though you're going through the same online portal. You just use a new tablet that you got to help work a little bit from home. The new apartment, the tablet, the location, and your other general online behavior contributing to your digital fingerprint have changed, and thus the prices have changed. Where once you were barely making it by because everything was priced in at the maximum you were willing or able to pay on a $50,000 salary, now again you're barely making it by because the entire retail environment has adjusted around you, extracting the maximum value that you are willing or able to pay yet again, as it determines the perfect price, rather the highest price that it can achieve from you. That is what's called perfect price discrimination. And when I say perfect, I just mean flawless in execution. I certainly don't mean beneficial. For the company, sure, every customer pays the highest possible amount because that's what you charge them. That's the price they get served. There is no option to haggle in a digital storefront. And that's as high as they're willing to psychologically go. For you, not so much. You will have what you earn extracted in almost imperceptible ways, leaving you in a perpetual state of barely getting by. And sure, all the weak people can sit here and say, well, that'll never happen, and what a gloomy perspective, but hey, that's just reality. That's the trend we're on. That's where my brain goes. And at this stage, the movement towards first-degree widespread industry price discrimination is categorically undeniable. At the end of the day, price discrimination already permeates the world around us. It just happens to exist in a format that most of us are able to benefit from, typically right now. However, that reality is changing. Younger generations are exhibiting extremely irresponsible behavior when it comes to financial security, savings, or retirement, with nearly 1/3 of them, according to a Bread Financial survey, not budgeting at all and spending more than they make. On top of this, younger generations are self-aware of their own vulnerability, while 2/3 of those surveyed openly express that they believe their generation is the most financially irresponsible with money. Combine those two realities, which are colliding in real time, I might add, and what do you get? You get a retail environment where price discrimination is getting more and more refined every day, able to extract higher and higher individual values based on data collected, and manipulation factors like timing purchases to when a customer is most vulnerable to them, while the customers that they serve are becoming more and more irresponsible with their spending. Think about that. What's to be done? I have no idea. You can act erratically online, trying to destabilize your digital fingerprint or obfuscate as much of your data as possible with a VPN, such as the one linked down below with an affiliate deal for the channel, as well as various other privacy methods. But the majority of the modern world engages with these systems for the sake of convenience and is completely unwilling to do that. As a result, the data collected continues to increase, the targeted capability for companies to discriminate their prices based on willingness to pay persistently rises, and the ultimate effect is that more and more of the population has their income squeezed away by personalized or dynamic pricing. Don't be one of them. That's it. If you want support, check out the links down below. The video sponsor, of course, Ground News, a VPN affiliate for those who want to check that out as well, social media, and more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling. As always, thank you all for watching, question everything, and have a nice night.